What's up, everyone? Tara Roberts here with Fantasy Pros, bringing you my top 10 waiver wire ads for week 16. Before I get into the list, this holiday season you can win big with Trophy's Max 36-inch fantasy football trophy giveaway. Just subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel and comment on any video for your chance to claim this impressive symbol of fantasy football glory. Celebrate your championship in festive style, but make sure you turn on notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize. Before I jump into our first player, note that because we are deeper in the fantasy playoffs, I am lowering the threshold a little bit here to 40% or less rostered. Most players on this list are less than 30% rostered. Now let's go ahead and dive right in. Number 10, Surman and Tyler Goodson. I'm cheating here and doing a tandem backfield. When Zach Moss went down, Surman stepped in as the lead back with 17 carries for 88 yards. Tyler Goodson also had a strong performance with 11 carries for 69 yards and 2 receptions for 10 yards. And it seems very clear that he would have the receiving edge here moving forward. I lean towards Surman as the priority ad, but Goodson is a potential ad in deeper leagues if your league mates outbid you for Surman. I wouldn't bid super aggressive on this because Jonathan Taylor could be coming back this week. The timeline for Jonathan Taylor's return was around 3 weeks, so that would place us around a week 16 return. And it sounds like there's optimism that this return can happen this week, if he returns. Remember, the injury has nothing to do with his legs, so it's possible that he comes back to a full workload and all other backs are irrelevant. So I lean towards Surman for the bulk of carries, but be very cautious with bidding because he could have no role here. So he's at the back of the list. Number 9, Tucker Kraft. Tucker Kraft has been overlooked for weeks now, but it's time that fantasy managers look at him for what he is. The Packers tight end one that plays between 95 and 100% of snaps. Kraft has averaged 10 fantasy points per game and had 2 touchdowns since becoming the full-time starter. And while 10 fantasy points doesn't scream must add, averaging 10 fantasy points per game makes you a tight end one. And trust seems to be growing game by game here with Kraft. He looks fantastic, he had a strong receiving profile in college, and his production should stick rest of season. Number 8, Roshan Johnson. I feel like we're on a roller coaster with Chicago running backs, and I completely understand if you want nothing to do with this roller coaster. But we've got a special reason why we're hopping back on this crazy ride. Chicago plays Arizona this week, and Arizona is the gift that keeps on giving to running backs. And it's not just Christian McCaffrey demolishing them. Arizona gives up an average of over 120 yards to opposing running backs. And again, it's not CMC's 2 matchups that prop this up. Kenneth Walker, Kyron Williams, Devin Singletary, Tony Pollard, all over 100 rushing yards, and others were very close to that mark. Khalil Herbert and Donta Foreman both had 6 carries in week 15, and Johnson had 5 carries, but he was by far the most productive back, and he did have a massive edge in receiving work. If you're desperate at running back, you can take a stab at Johnson. Number 7, Hunter Henry. I've been hesitant to recommend Hunter Henry at any point this season coming off of a strong performance because his performances have been some of the most volatile at tight end the entire season. When your range of outcomes is legitimately 0 to 20, that is terrifying. But Bailey Zappi is on a bit of a roll here, and Hunter Henry has been a big beneficiary. 2 weeks in a row with 19 fantasy points. And in week 15, he saw a very encouraging 9 targets. It's tough to believe that it will stick, but this week's matchup is against Denver, and that is a very good matchup for tight ends. Henry is a strong streaming option. Number 6, Jameson Williams. Jameson Williams returned to play in week 5 and spent a very frustrating month being sparingly used. And while his target share was still paltry up until week 15, his snap count did increase and he has been very efficient with his targets, but we saw a flip in usage in week 15 to 7 targets, and I am willing to take a leap of faith here that Dan Campbell will reward his play with continued volume. There are very few things that you can depend on in fantasy football, but oddly enough, Jared Goff in a dome is one of them. He's a California boy who never left California until he went to Detroit in a dome, and when you know it, he is playing in domes for the remainder of the season. Goff in a dome plus increased targets for Williams could yield some late season results. Before I get into my top 5 waivers for week 16, we want to thank BetterHelp for sponsoring today's video. Is something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice. BetterHelp can match you to one of over 30,000 therapists in their network, which gives you access to a wider range of expertise than may be available in your area. If you think you might benefit from therapy, consider BetterHelp. Click the link in the description of this video or go to betterhelp.com/fantasypros. Number 5, Chase Brown. I had Chase Brown on the list last week as a priority handcuff ad, and he's back here again, but he might actually be more than a handcuff. It's tough to depend on a guy that is playing between 15 to 30% of snaps compared to 60 to 70 for Mixon. This is clearly not a flip and rolls, rather a transition to giving a backup high value touches that can produce on a limited workload. Mixon is still the lead back. Brown had 9 carries in week 13, 8 carries in week 14, and 7 carries in week 15, plus 6 receptions over the past 2 games. And it's not garbage time production that we're seeing here. He's used early and throughout the game in creative scenarios. The Bengals clearly love his talent, and it's possible that he could see an uptick in usage if Ja'Marr Chase misses time with his separated shoulder. Brown has receiving upside, and he has been reliable, and Browning is very fond of throwing short passes. This combination would just make sense. Brown is worth an ad as both a handcuff and potential standalone value. Number 4, Josh Palmer. The Chargers put up one of the most shockingly bad performances of the season, but lost in the chaos was the return of Josh Palmer. He immediately stepped in as the leader of the receiving corps with 4 receptions on 4 targets for 113 yards and a touchdown. Not bad for a guy coming off IR. Easton Stick made quite a few mistakes, but all in all, he did at least supply enough volume to support the pass catchers here. Keenan Allen could return this week, but it's also possible that he remains out because there's no true reason to rush him back until he is fully healthy. Palmer could be the wide receiver 1 again this week, and at the very least, he's the clear wide receiver 2 next to Allen. Palmer is a solid ad and definitely in play if Keenan Allen is out. Number 3, Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jerick McKinnon. Once again, I am doing a tandem backfield. We saw both Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jerick McKinnon had fairly similar results in terms of fantasy production this week. Last week, McKinnon had the slight edge, and this week it was CEH. As long as Pacheco is out, I think that continues. They're both worth an ad if available. CEH is the lower rostered player, but I would actually prioritize CEH. The reasoning is that the next 2 matchups are against Vegas and Cincinnati. Both of those matchups should be games where Kansas City is playing from ahead, or at the very least in a competitive game. I would rather lean on the back that gets the bulk of carries, and CEH has proven that through 2 games. He is the clear edge in carries and still has receiving upside. I would add CEH. Number 2, Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco is averaging about 19.5 fantasy points over the past 3 weeks. A strong play as a QB1. Wild, but true. And make no mistake, he will absolutely continue to turn the ball over. He has had a whopping 5 interceptions in the past 3 games. But when you're throwing for over 300 yards and multiple touchdowns in each game, it's a bit of a wash. As a result, the Browns' run game has greatly suffered, but the Browns are winning, and as long as they're doing so, I would expect Flacco's volume to remain high. The Browns play Houston this week, and Houston has been more of a neutral matchup against the pass. I would see Flacco as one of the top streaming options this week. Number 1, Samir White. At the time of filming this video, we don't have any indication on where Josh Jacobs is at in terms of his recovery, but there is no real incentive for Jacobs to push himself to return, and if he is out, Samir White is in play. I hate to admit it, I was a bit surprised by White's production, and we do have to put in a caveat here because it was against the Chargers, but 17 carries to just 6 carries by Amir Abdullah and 2 carries by Brandon Bolden is clear indication that there is trust in White. That is the key. This week's matchup is against Kansas City, and it is rough. Overall, the Chiefs have been stout against the run, so we want to go with the volume play here. White played 70% of snaps, and he tacked on a little bit of receiving work as well with 3 receptions. Not bad. Add White in case Jacobs is out. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And remember, this holiday season, you can win big with Trophy Smack's 36-inch fantasy football trophy giveaway. Just subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel and comment on any video for your chance to claim this impressive symbol of fantasy football glory. Celebrate your championship in festive style, but make sure you turn on notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize.